Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea this year has attracted more foreign tourists than ever before, 17.25 million people, and likely to go above 17.5 million by the end of the year. U.S. President Donald Trump confirms that he and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping will hold a signing ceremony for their Phase 1 trade deal. That deal is now in translation and will be ready in early January. And South Korean President Moon-Abe calls on the world to take action to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula. If the North takes steps to denuclearize, he says the world should then respond accordingly. It's 4:00 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. President Moon-Abe says that while efforts to build peace on the Korean Peninsula are generating progress below the surface, more action needs to be taken to actually achieve it. This was in an article he contributed Thursday to Project Syndicate, a global media outlet that publishes commentary by political leaders, business leaders, and scholars. According to President Moon, trust remains intact between the leaders of North Korea and the U.S., and they are still determined to maintain dialogue. And if Pyongyang takes sincere steps to denuclearize, he says the international community should take corresponding measures. The president also called for international support for his plan to remove the 380,000 landmines at the demilitarized zone, which will help guarantee the North's security and establish permanent peace. President Moon also asked for support for South Korea's joint bid with the North to host the 2032 Summer Olympics. North Korea has been warning the U.S. that it has a Christmas gift for President Trump, widely believed to be a long-range missile test. But Christmas is come and gone, and no sign of a military provocation, big or small. Analysts, however, are watching closely because there's still the regime's unilateral deadline for the nuclear talks at the year's end. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
Christmas has passed in Korea with no apparent gift to the U.S. by the regime. Tensions were rising as North Korean diplomat Lee Tae-sung warned earlier this month that the regime could send an undesirable Christmas gift to Washington if it does not deliver a new approach to relations between the two sides. South Korean government and military officials said Wednesday that they are closely monitoring any developments, but added no signs of provocation had been witnessed so far. The U.S. also flew 4 surveillance planes over the Korean Peninsula between Tuesday and early Wednesday. As it is unusual for so many American surveillance planes to conduct missions around the region at the same time, the latest movement shows the U.S. is taking the situation very seriously. However, there were no signs of movements in North Korea, including preparations for a long-range missile or satellite launch. Neither were there signs suggesting the 5th plenary meeting of the 7th Central Committee of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea is imminent. Analysts say Chinese President Xi Jinping's indirect message to the North's leader Kim Jong-un to refrain from any major provocations on the sidelines of the recent Seoul-Beijing summit could have played a role. As we draw ever closer to the North's self-imposed year-end deadline for the U.S. to be more flexible in nuclear negotiations, the regime's Nodong Sinmun, the mouthpiece of the ruling Workers' Party, published an article on artificial satellites for peaceful purposes. In a piece titled Global Movement Towards Space Development, the paper explained satellite launches by China, India, and Egypt. It pointed out that many countries are expanding their capacities for space exploration, which could imply the regime's intention to do so as well. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The North Korean women's soccer team will not be competing in an upcoming Olympic qualifying tournament in South Korea. According to Yonhap News Agency, North Korea notified the Asian Football Confederation that the squad will not compete in the 3rd round of Asian qualifying for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. It did not explain why. The competition will take place on Jeju Island from February 3rd to the 9th. South and North Korea were to face off against each other in Group A along with Vietnam and Myanmar. The top 2 teams from each group advanced to the final playoff round. A new poll shows almost 3/4 of Seoul citizens think it is necessary for the two Koreas to unify in the future. According to an online survey of 2,000 citizens conducted by the Seoul Metropolitan Government, 74% of respondents said unification needs to happen. Of those, 25% said it'll occur within 20 years, and around a fifth said within 30 years. However, 17% of respondents said unification is impossible. The survey also found that relatively few Seoul citizens think inter-Korean relations will improve anytime soon. Less than 40% of those polled said ties will get better in the next 5 years. As for North Korea denuclearizing, according to a majority of 70%, the chances are low. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga has evaluated President Moon's summit with Prime Minister Abe in China on Christmas Eve as meaningful. In a regular briefing on Wednesday, Suga said Abe asked for a swift resolution to the issue of compensating the Koreans drafted by Japan into forced labor during World War II. He added that Moon and Abe agreed to continue their consultations. The filibuster, launched Monday by the Liberty Korea Party, ended automatically today as the clock struck midnight and the provisional session of the National Assembly closed. Clocking in at 50 hours, the filibuster by the main opposition party was intended to delay the fast-track introduction of an electoral reform bill. The ruling Democratic Party has decided to open an extra session in which they'll vote on the bill, which was proposed by the Democratic Party, 3 minor parties, and 1 splinter group. The vote in the extra session was supposed to happen today, but there's speculation it could be delayed by a day because members of the Assembly's committees are exhausted, having been there for 50 hours straight during the filibuster. The number of foreign tourists to South Korea has hit a record high of 17.25 million this year. To celebrate the achievement, the government held a welcome ceremony this morning at Incheon International Airport for an Indonesian family that put Korea over the line. Kan Hyung-woo has this story.
17,250,000. That's how many foreign tourists have come to South Korea so far in 2019, and it's a record high. Government officials went out to Incheon International Airport Thursday morning to greet a 6-member family from Indonesia, one of whom became the 17,250,000th visitor of the year.
I'm really interested in Korean history, so I plan on visiting the royal palaces in Seoul. My kids love K-pop, so we will be visiting some related attractions. And I want to eat Hanu galbi.
With 17.25 million visitors, the previous record set in 2016 is already broken by 50,000 people. And with another 250,000 people expected by year's end, the total should reach 17.5 million. According to the Korea Tourism Organization's estimates, tourism will have generated revenue this year worth some $21 billion.
The most important thing is that a wide range of Korean content, including Hallyu, is seen as attractive. We've diversified our market, carrying out more promotions and expanding marketing strategies to countries in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. All that played a role in raising number of foreign visitors.
From January to September, the number of foreigners coming to South Korea rose by 16% compared to a year earlier, a much higher rate of growth than the global average of 4%. Accordingly, Korea's ranking in the 2019 World Economic Forum's Tourism Competitiveness Report has gone up to 16th out of 140 countries, 3 spots higher than 2 years ago. With the latest milestone in the books, the South Korean government plans to work with the tourism industry, aiming to have 20 million foreign tourist arrivals next year. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
The venue of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, Gangwon-do Province, is hosting a 3-month-long winter festival. With a variety of sports and cultural programs, it's expected to attract a lot of foreign tourists and help make the area a hub for winter tourism. Lee Kyung-eun reports from Gangwon-do Province.
It is the most anticipated day of their trip to the winter wonderland in Gangwon-do Province. First, they find a pair of boots and ski binding plates in their sides. Once they finally get out on the snowfield, they start learning how to walk, how to stand up when they fall over, and how to make an A shape on the slope. From Malaysia to Singapore and Hong Kong, hundreds of foreign tourists come here each day to enjoy skiing as part of their Snow Festa tour. Participants from East Asian countries are the primary target of this festa, as it falls perfectly in time with their school vacation season. but most importantly, it gives them a taste of winter and snow that cannot be had in their countries, and it is, they say, worth making a whole trip for.
And the fall down, I think is quite difficult to stand down. Still very nice.
I come here for skiing because we don't have a chance to see snow in Hong Kong.
For their convenience, ski lessons are provided in various languages, while English-speaking staffs are available to help at the Tourist Information Center that has its own separate building. The ski resort in Hongcheon is only one of the 9 venues in Gangwon-do Province that are participating in the Snow Festival, offering sports and cultural programs for foreign tourists. This large-scale sports tourism is organized by Gangwon-do Province in partnership with private and public sectors in a bid to raise the region's reputation as Asia's winter tourism hub.
Based on the themes of Olympic legacy, the Korean wave and snow, we've teamed up with the cities and counties within the province to enhance our winter tourism.
Thanks to such collaborations, the Festa offers a variety of winter activities across the entire province, such as Kpop concerts, strawberry picking, and ice fishing, as well as skiing. And the so-called G-Shuttle will operate throughout the Festa season, connecting the tourists from Seoul and Gangwon-do Province. 이경은, Arirang News, Hongcheon.
South Korea was #1 this year when it comes to foreign investment in Vietnam. According to Vietnam's Ministry of Planning and Investment, total foreign investment so far this year came to $38.2 billion, up 7.2% from the same period last year. By country, South Korea was ranked first with $7.92 billion, accounting for over a fifth of the total figure. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Kim Se-won, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Dr. Kim, thanks for making time today.
Good afternoon, Devin.
Well, it looks like Chinese President Xi Jinping will be coming to South Korea in the first half of next year, so there's a lot of anticipation that'll help improve relations between the two countries. What would you say about the prospects for their economic ties vis-a-vis the THAAD missile defense situation and other factors?
Yes, President Xi's official visit to Korea is, of course, a good news in improving recent unfriendly relation between the two countries. But even with friendly gesture between the two summits, there are still quite a few restrictions from China to Korea, like banned group tour, banned K-pop in China, and so on. I think Beijing will use these restrictions as a leverage of withdrawing a THAAD system in Korean territory in the future. So it won't be easy to fully recover the relation between the two countries, even with President Xi's visit to Korea next year.
Well, the U.S. and China are going to sign the first phase of their trade deal next month. China lowering tariffs on U.S. goods, so it'll be importing more. Some positive response there from investors. In that context, take us through the global markets.
It looks that global equity market is increasing due to the weakened pressure from U.S.-China trade war. U.S. market actually was pretty mixed in the Christmas Eve market the day before yesterday. Over today, Tokyo market increased by 0.6% or 60 basis point, and Shanghai index also increased by 70 basis point. So in Asian equity markets, we can see that lessened pressure from U.S.-China trade conflict.
Right, and we may have seen an effect similar to that in Korea recently. The Kospi, it's been range-bound, but for a few weeks gradually getting higher. Performance still weaker than some other parts of the world, though. So what's the story in the Korean markets?
Korean equity market for today was pretty lucrative, I have to say. For example, Kosdaq gained by 2.06%. That was a huge increase. But Kospi gained 36 basis point. And in today's Korean equity market, foreign and individual investors sold equity, but domestic institutional investor was large buyer for today. But in the long run, I have to say that the reason that foreign investors are not coming back to Korean equity market is related to weak performance of big manufacturers in South Korean economy.
Referring to chip makers, I assume?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Well, speaking of those, according to the Korean government, exports of semiconductors and cars, which were down this year, will start rising in the first half of the new year. Still, with protectionism rising in the U.S.-China trade war, it's not clear how long that rise might last. Are we set for a recovery in exports in 2020?
Well, that is a really tough question because it is very hard to answer that question with 100% confidence as of now. But according to experts on global chip market and automobile market, there could be possible recoveries in the two markets until the end of first half of next year, as you said. However, it is also true that structural factors like U.S.-China trade war and Brexit of UK and other geopolitical factors like Hong Kong and are still going on. So recoveries of Korean export, particularly in chip export and automobile export, will be clearly seen sometime in the second quarter of next year.
All right, we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Dr. Kim, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now, U.S. President Donald Trump has revealed he and Chinese President Xi Jinping will hold a ceremony early next month to sign the first phase of their trade deal. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Earlier this month, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer announced that Washington and Beijing will sign their Phase 1 trade deal agreement in the first week of January. That signing has now been confirmed by President Trump, who on Tuesday said he and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to hold a ceremony to ink the deal. Speaking to reporters at his Florida resort, Trump says the two leaders will get together, adding the deal is done and is now being translated. On Wednesday, China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Geng Shuang confirmed a statement from Trump, saying both countries are in close contact and have been discussing detailed arrangements for the deal's signing and other follow-up work. However, Beijing is yet to reveal the specifics of the deal, saying it would be made public after the official signing. The two countries announced earlier this month that the Phase 1 deal would suspend an escalation of the trade war between the two sides and lower tariffs on a portion of affected products. The 86-page agreement is expected to be signed next month at a ministerial level, meaning it would not involve Trump or Xi. While the first phase would bring this trade spat to a halt, the two countries expect at least 2 more stages. Meanwhile, Chinese tech giant Huawei, which has long been the center of controversy between Washington and Beijing, is reportedly receiving tens of billions of dollars in financial assistance from the Chinese government. The Wall Street Journal reports that Huawei has had access to as much as $75 billion in state support through grants, credit facilities, tax breaks, and other forms of financial assistance. The U.S. has long accused the Chinese tech giant of being a spy for Beijing, and watchers say the latest report could back up those concerns. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Following in the footsteps of France, Italy is going to impose a digital tax on global tech companies. The move's likely to rile the United States, which has been already responding to such measures with retaliatory tariffs. Yoon Jung-min has the details.
Italy will follow France's suit when it comes to imposing taxes on global IT giants, which will be unwelcome news for the U.S. The Italian parliament passed the digital tax into law this week, imposing a 3% levy on revenue for companies that earn more than 750 million euros and at least 5.5 million euros in Italy. The new tax, which takes effect New Year's Day, only targets business-to-business transactions, including advertising or cloud computing services. Some European countries have been complaining that American tech companies pay too little in taxes in countries where they have users. Italy's parliament passed a digital tax last year as well, but put off its implementation to wait and see if there would be uniform taxation by the OECD or EU. The move, however, is likely to trigger backlash from the US, which has been criticizing France for its own digital tax on IT giants. Washington insists the tax targets American tech firms such as Facebook, Google, and Apple. In response, the Trump administration said it's going to impose tariffs of up to 100% on French wine, cheese, and handbags. It has also warned of similar retaliation against Italy. France, for its part, has threatened to bring the case to the WTO once the U.S. imposes its retaliatory taxes. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korea is cracking down on colored plastic bottles and certain kinds of packaging that are hard to recycle because they contain PVC. Our Kim Jae-hee has this report.
On Wednesday, South Korea's Ministry of Environment enacted new regulations on plastic to boost resource circulation and help protect the environment. The revision of the Resource Recycling Act bans the manufacture and use of colored plastic bottles for beverages because transparent plastic bottles are easier to shred and more easily recycled. Those already stocked in stores can be sold, but no more after that. PVC packaging, which is commonly used to wrap food and household products, is also banned in the same way. Plastic bottles will also be rated on a 4-grade scale depending on their recyclability, and companies will be taxed more depending on how difficult their products are to recycle under the new grading system. The worst offenders will also be liable for an environmental fine. Local consumers were both surprised and amused to see the familiar green soju bottles swapped out for transparent ones.
It's different from the original soju. It looks like bottled water now. I prefer the green ones.
I was surprised to see the sudden color change, but it looks clean and I like it.
Lotte Chilsung Cider has also swapped its green bottles to colorless ones. It's the first change in 35 years since the drink's launch in 1984. However, some products like medicines and certain foods require colored packaging to keep them from deteriorating. Beer, for example, is exempt from the new rules, but the government says it plans to find an alternative option for beer within the next 5 years. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
Emergency measures are being taken to reduce fine dust pollution in the South Korean cities of Sejong and Daegu. In the Gangwon-do Provinces, the measures are in force now for a second day in a row. Under the measures, vehicles belonging to the government and public sector workers can only be driven if they have an even-numbered license plate. Also, the worst polluting cars, classified as grade 5, are banned from the roads entirely. These measures are enforced when ultrafine dust is expected to exceed 500 micrograms per cubic meter for 2 consecutive days, or 75 micrograms per cubic meter throughout the next day. About 2,600 people from other countries have taken a class on K-pop supported by the Korean government. The Korean Culture and Information Service said Thursday that the number of people attending the so-called Kpop Academy in the past 8 months has increased 15% on year. Organized by the Culture Ministry, the program teaches Korean pop songs and dances to fans at 25 Korean culture centers in 21 countries. The dance class has been about twice as popular as the singing class. And the scope of the students' interest has diversified to include ballads and TV drama soundtracks, as well as songs by popular idol groups like BTS and Twice. According to the organizers, 85% of the participants said they wanted to visit South Korea after having taken the class. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.
what can